should put into it before something bad's just gonna snap and let go.
Taking a chisel and smash the top sides of this nut. The nut's compromised enough and it'll just break right there. And
I'll show you this nut, how far I had to take it down. Look at that, man.
Hello, I'm Mike and welcome to 33 Bog Garage. I'm on the freeway today with a 2006 Jeep Wrangler, and this thing's all over the road. The sensation's a little bit weird with it because it feels loose. The steering itself is actually tight, but you can almost feel the front tires wanting to wobble or shake. So I think that's leading to probably a hub assembly.
All right, I got the Jeep up in the air, got jack stands underneath it. And as I was explaining to you before, when I was driving down the road, the front end felt loose. I checked the tie rod ends and stuff like that. All that were tight. The steering itself actually feels pretty tight. What the issue is I believe it's the hub assembly, because I can take the tire and it's got play in it. It's probably rocking maybe about a quarter inch one way or the other. I'm pretty sure that it's hub assembly. I got brand new hub assemblies. I'm going to do both sides. The passenger side is not nearly as bad as the driver's side, but if new hub assemblies, I'm going to put them in. Should be a pretty easy job. All it is taking the wheel off. I got to take the hub bolt out, and then there's 3 bolts on the back. These might be a little bit tough to get out. They're probably rust in there, but hoping. If this doesn't make a big improvement on the steering, it's one problem that I need to fix, and then I'm going to have to look at the steering box next. So let's get this done. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this caliper out of the way. So I'm going to take this cotter pin out. Fight you a little bit. All right, cotter pin's out of the way. And then we're just going to take this nut cap off. Underneath the nut cap, there's going to be this retaining washer. Pop that retaining washer out. All right, next up, all we're going to do is pop this 36mm nut off there. This is torqued down there pretty good. I'm hoping to grab it with impact. If not, I'm going to have to break or bar it. And I'm putting everything I feel like I should put into it before something bad's just going to snap and let go. I feel like I'm going to break my breaker bar at this point.
well, the reason why I can't get this thing off is somebody had taken a chisel and smashed the top sides of this nut in about 4 different places, smashed the nut down onto the spindle so the nut can't back itself off. However, you know, if they thought that was a good idea at the time, man, if you ever have to service these things, it makes it impossible. So I'm left with no other choice but now either to heat it up, but I don't really want to damage the spindle, so I want to be careful. I'm going to come in with a cutoff wheel and cut the nut to try to compromise the nut and see if I can just break the nut off of it. I've done with the nut now that I've ground the whole thing down. Now I'm going to put the socket back on there and hopefully I can the nut's compromised enough and it'll just break right there and get the nut off it. But man, that thing has been a challenge. It just doesn't want to give up.
I think I finally won the battle here. I got the air hammer in here, and it looks like I was able to finally break it free with an air hammer. Woo! That right there was a stubborn one, man. I'll show you this nut, how far I had to take it down. Look at that, man. I literally took the nut down to nothing. All right, we're on the back side of the hub assembly, and we just got to get these 3 bolts out. I did spray them with some penetrating oil. Got a 19mm socket, and I'm just gonna break these guys loose. Top one is probably gonna be this one here. I'm gonna spin the wheel back around the opposite side and get the other 2 from the back.
Just a quick note, the factory style bolts are a 12-point socket style. They're susceptible to stripping out very easily and they're very expensive to replace. So in my case, these were replaced with 19mm metric bolts.
All right, I got the steering wheel cut all the way to the right. I got this nut exposed. That way it's not sitting back against this bracket. And hopefully these dudes just, yep, no problem. I break them free with a breaker bar. These came out as a piece of cake in comparison to that nut. Yeah. You know, every project that I do, I seem like I get caught up with something like that. And, you know, I want to show you guys the reality. You know, I could edit that stuff out, but you guys are going to run into the same exact stuff. Or, I don't know, maybe I just got really horrible luck, because if you watch any of my videos, I'll tell you what, man, I run into stuff like this all the time. All right, so I got the 3 bolts out of the back, and the thing came right apart already. The only thing I got to deal with is I got the washer stuck in there. I had to get that out, and that just came with a hub assembly. So I saved the washer, hub assembly is out. And one thing I'm going to do is, with all the grinding that I did, I am going to wipe all the grease out of here and re-grease all of this too when I put the new wheel hub assembly in. I want to clean that up good, make sure there's no grinding dust between here. I got all the grease off the axle shaft. I'll put some new grease on before I put this together. Get this guy back in place. I get the 3/19mm. I did clean up the surface behind there decently, so this will all slide back together again. There we go. All right, we're on the back side of the axle, and we're just going to put these 19mm bolts back through and get that hub mounted back on. Meter bolts get torqued to 75 foot-pounds or 102 Newton meters. Tear this down, and before I put my bar in here to hold it, what I did is I put the lug nuts back on because I don't want to mess up the threads. And then you're going to torque this to 175 foot-pounds or 237 Newton meters. That's a monster. Again, don't mess up your threads on your brand new spindle. You want to do something like that, and then torque this thing down. So that's it for the hub assembly. So now that we got this nut torqued to spec, the next thing that we're going to do is place this washer on here. This washer's got a curve in it. What that washer does is once it's placed on there, the castle nut goes, or it's not a castle nut, but it's a castle retainer. So you just index this so the holes line up for the cotter pin. So you might have to position it a couple different times like that, get the holes line up, and then you can see what happens. So I got to push it down to get the cotter pin through. And you probably, in this case, you want to use a new cotter pin because these are a little tricky to line back up. And then you could just push your cotter pin through. And then you can see what happens when the cotter pin goes through, that it's actually pushing that C-shaped retainer in. And once you get your cotter pin in, just do your thing. All right, next up, I'm going to take my nuts that I was using to protect the threads as I torqued it. Get these guys off here, put the rotor on, and then I can get the brake caliper back on. And that's pretty much it. This thing will be back together and ready to go. And of course I got the other side, but yeah, the other side's exactly the same. Except it's the other side. Here we go. Rotor back in position. And it's a good thing I put zip ties on the caliper because that just fell off the top of the control arm. And the zip ties caught it, and that's way better than it catching on the line and ripping the line out of the caliper. So that's cool. All right, next up, I'm going to put the brake caliper back on, and you can see I'm glad I did zip tie these things on here because I knocked it and it did fall down, but the zip tie caught it versus the brake line catching it, which is a good thing. So get this guy back in place. Get these. So. Now, I guess we'll get the wheels and tires on it, take it for a ride, and see how it is.
So after taking the Jeep for a ride for a little bit, I'm on the freeway, I'm 65-ish miles an hour right now, and the steering still does not feel right. I thought the hub assemblies were a big part of the steering problem, not feeling right. I don't think the hub assemblies had much to do with it. There was play from side to side, and I really misdiagnosed that. There wasn't any play up and down, so not having any play up and down, I think I ruled out the problem that it wasn't really the hub assemblies. It was a maintenance item. I'm glad that I put new hub assemblies on it, but I don't believe that that was really the cause of the steering issue. So at 70 miles an hour, the steering just does not feel right. I hit some bumps and stuff, and it seems like it takes me a couple seconds down the road to gather the thing back up. It just does not feel right. So I think I'm going to change out the steering box to see if that doesn't help. In the past, I've tightened up the steering box a little bit, and it did help, but I think the steering box is pretty much all worn out. Hey, I'm Mike, and thanks for watching 33 Mile Garage.